again to start streaming. Yeah, it started. So now, welcome everybody to the stream. I'm here again with Tech and Dog, and yeah, this time we talk about Enlightenment Ethics. I wanted to make a video, but it would have been a long video, and I don't like video editing. And so I thought, why not make a stream again? And perhaps I can hear live feedback from another perspective as well. So the basic introduction is, I wrote everything down as a script, so it might be sometimes a bit reading heavy, and then I go into conversation mode again. Yeah. The basics thing is, sometimes it's difficult to understand when somebody says something or believes some things, and then it seems very contradictory to you. And so, since we're in the West, the most prevalent forms of ethics are essentially the Greek Stoics ethics, which everything builds on, or which is the oldest version, like with Aristotle. And then came the Christians, which fused the Greek ethic, the Greek virtue ethics with Jewish ethics, and that's essentially the Christian virtue ethics. And then came the Enlightenment with the Utilitarian ethics. And so these are the three forms of ethics which I will talk about this evening, or this, for me it's already almost 1 o'clock in the morning, so yeah. So, and I think you are also somewhat familiar with all three of these forms of ethics. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, good. Perhaps in some you will have insight that I don't. And I just noticed that I ate before. I ate, I don't know how they're called in English, probably something along the line of cactus figs or something like this. And they have small thorns. And I noticed that on 2 of my fingers I have some, which, apparently it snuck by in the last 1 hour of streaming. So of building a mountain. But anyway, Stoics. This one I know the least about. This one I write the fewest things about, but essentially, back then the ancient Greeks, they had to rethink or think up a lot of how the world looks like, and then they thought that everything is made up of ideal forms. Like the principle is very relatable. For example, if I draw a triangle, I can say it looks like a good triangle or a bad one. And the way they conceptualized it is they say, this is there is an ideal form of a triangle, and I create a real representation of that ideal triangle. And that's, the closer it gets to the ideal form, the better of a triangle it is. And if I make something that is very almost a circle or whatever, then it's a very bad representation of a triangle. And they applied it to everything. So, for example, the dogs, there is essentially something which makes something a dog and not a cat, for example. And so the more dogness something has, the closer it is to an ideal dog. And it's, of course, this is completely different to how we look at it nowadays, but that is, to the best of my understanding, that's how they viewed it. And they also applied it to virtues. They had, for example, Aristotle's 4 cardinal virtues of prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. those were some virtues, and each of these had an ideal form. And as a human, you tried to, or as a good human, you tried to live out all virtues to the fullest extent possible. That's how I understand this, and perhaps you can correct me. I assume in this aspect you are a bit more knowledgeable than I am.
Yeah, it sounds pretty close. I think this was more of a Plato school of thought than Aristotle, but yeah, this is a kind of
Hmm.
a good introduction to Greek philosophy.
Yeah. Would you say I missed something crucial, or is that uh, that? Yeah.
No, no, I think we can work with this.
What?
No, it's fine. I think we can work with this.
Okay. Yeah. And now next section is a similar length. The Christian virtue ethics. Ever since Paul, Jewish thought started to be more open to integrate foreign concepts into their philosophy. I said since Paul because he was very open to yeah. One Bible verse said to the Jewish, you're a Jew, and to the Greek, you're a Greek. Like if they had a Greek temple and a Greek god, and they didn't know the name, and it was an unknown god, then he went there and used that as a means of telling them about Jesus. And
Hmm.
so I don't know if it's actually if it's true, but it sounds pretty plausible to me that since Paul, the Jewish thought opened up, and one milestone in that aspect was when Aquinas integrated the Greek virtues with the biblical statements, and there they said like we have a single triune God, and that one is the cause of everything, and he is also love. So the and also according to Jesus, love is the like the one law is you have to love God with all your heart and all your mind and everything, and you have to love your fellow humans, uh, or your neighbor like yourself, and essentially all the virtues are a form of how this can look like in daily life. So, for example, if you are a fortitude, and I assume that is similar to patience, or justice, it's uh, if you love your fellow humans, you are just, and you act out justice and stuff like this. So these virtues all exist as independent things, but they are all like caused by love. So the if you have justice, but it is not justice that is built on love, then it is not actual justice. So it's like everything should uh, uh, build on love. So this is the uh, but even though virtues are, yeah, they are still independent things that are worth pursuing. And yeah, the one big difference is, uh, if I understood it correctly, in the Greek thought or in the Stoic thought, there, if you want to live out as human in the fullest way possible, you had to pursue the virtues. And now it is instead of yeah, now essentially God, Jesus died on the cross for us, and so we are not judged by our virtues, that how we live them out, but instead how by the Jesus virtues. And all we do is basically out of gratefulness for Jesus, we love our neighbors. So it's a different motive on why we live out the virtues. But essentially, or in practice, the it plays out pretty similarly. Both are virtue ethics.
Mm.
And yeah, here I brought the example with justice on how it would look like from a Christian perspective. For example, um, I want to have justice to bring comfort for the victim. I want to have justice to prevent future victims for created. So like scaring other people into not being criminals. Then I want to remove that criminal from society so that he can't create other acts. And also, if we put a criminal to justice, then he may be made aware of the gravity of his action, and then he may seek repentance and change. So here, that's how essentially the virtue of justice is built on love, because all of the motivation for the justice is not just to um, like for put someone in prison for putting someone in prison's sake, but instead it's built on love for all people involved. So that would be my summary of virtue as a Christian virtue ethics. Do you have something to add here?
No, I agree with you.
That's nice that the thing I threw together is agreeable, at least with some American person. And now is the core part, or the now I will go into the utilitarian ethics, and this is the reason why I actually created the video. And the previous one serve as a contrast to this specific one. So yeah, I think everybody has noticed that some people in the West claim to be virtuous, and in practice they do exactly the opposite. And or or others are very insistent on virtue in one area, and then they completely ignore the same virtue in another area. Let's just say being against genocide. In Gaza, it's the worst thing that can happen, and in Sudan, let's not talk about it. There, it's like I think Arabs killing black people for the sake of them being because they are black, and everybody ignores that. But in Israel, where it's Israelis killing Arabs, there it is a problem. So, and then the question is, if it's actually a virtue to be against genocide, then why is it a virtue in this area but not in the other? And so the issue is you actually look at you think being against genocide is a virtue because they tell you it is, but actually the virtue is in a completely different place. And the figuring out where that virtue is, that was the goal of this, or is the goal of this whole stream. And yeah, just as a context, I have no clue about philosophy. I have no clue about history of enlightenment and everything. All that I do is observe how it results in today's ideologies that I came across, and I do essentially do reverse engineering. So that's a small context. And would you I'm curious what your current take is. What are actually the virtues behind how both rationalists, like the skeptics and rationalists and new atheists and those people, and how the progressives and communists and feminists, what would you say are the underlying virtues of these people? Do you have a guess or an idea?
I don't think there really is any. I think for the leftists, it's the virtue signal. It's the easy one. Oh, look, we can point to the Israel thing that we don't like, and that's an easy signal because that's in the news. But this other thing going on, we don't know, we don't care, we don't really stand on any principle. This is just a virtue signal. And I guess for the communists, it's kind of the same thing. They virtue signal towards, oh look, the rich guy has taken all of the money. We support you little people. We'll help you. Put us in power where we can control everything. It's just the convenient virtue that gets you attention at the moment.
And for example, the new atheists, just so that you have also touched at the rationalist, what would you say is their virtue or your observation on their behavior?
Well, they're like the cat that lives in the house but and doesn't understand how it was built and just wants to destroy it all. they
Uh,
they come from a Christian world, a Christian foundation with a Christian background and go, well, yes, obviously slavery is bad. Well, it's not obvious that it's bad, especially with your worldview, because if we all just evolved from monkeys, then somebody's got to be more evolved than the other ones. So why shouldn't they enslave them? And we're all just going to die in the heat death of the universe and be gone. So what does it matter if people are suffering? I don't think they have any virtues
I guess I will.
except what they borrow from Christians.
I will quickly grab something and then let's see if I can convince you otherwise or if you keep your view after the stream.
Okay.
I'm back. So, um, during the French Revolution, people were fed up with old authority structures, yeah, both clerical and monarchical. So, and they persecuted, tortured, and killed hundreds of thousands of people who were representing and defending the old structures. Yeah, that's pretty. If you know history, then that's not controversial. If you don't know history, then you are like, what atheists do being say things? Yeah. Um, anyway, they thought that the original human or human are originally noble barbarians, and the authority structures are standing in the way of it. So every what did I say? Yeah, essentially they were proponents for the blank slate theory, and they thought that if you create a revolution, then you tear down all the authority structures, and then people can live out their pure noble state again, and then we can rebuild everything in a purely rational manner. And that's about as much of history as I want to get into. And the yeah, would you say that that portrayal of history is as a very very rough overview that is about accurate?
Yep.
Okay, good. And now yeah, that's also one thing which is nice to mention. One thing which they also wanted to do is in virtue ethics, we have virtues, and then we flipped. We have virtues, and then if we follow the virtues, there is justice. And during the French Revolution, they tried to be rational about everything. So they wanted to see the end result. And why is my PC beeping? Uh, yeah, they wanted to have the end result. Look at the end result. See, okay, this is a good end result. Let's just do whatever reaches the end result. So essentially, they inverted the ethics system and made it goal oriented. And yeah,
The
but
ends justify the means.
yes, but the issue is that way they completely undermined all of the virtues on a philosophical ground,
Mhm.
and yeah, but it is impossible to live without any ethical axioms at all. Rationality. I just finished the book Rationality by Steven Pinker's, and he also says rationality is a means to an end. You have a goal, and then rationality shows you how to get to that goal in the best way possible. So it is not, but you still need goals, and your ethics system still needs axioms. And so here are my proposals for two ethical axioms and two other core assumptions that completely make up all of Enlightenment ethics. So the first axiom is suffering is evil, and this one is with this one I mean it in a just similar to how the Stoics had the ideal form of the virtues. They mean suffering is evil also in the ideal form, like um, as soon as there is the tiniest bit of suffering, as my PC is beeping. I don't know. That's not a fire alarm. No, so if there is a tiniest bit of suffering that is unexplained, then that means there is evil in the world. That's why atheists say, but there is evil in the world. How can you good God allow it? Or why some intersectional feminists can say, "Oh, somebody misspelled my name. That is suffering, which is I experience now." So even the tiniest bit of inconvenience can be turned into an act of evil that way. So that's the first axiom, and the second
And
one,
speech is violence and
yeah,
hate
everything
speech. And,
exactly. But it's also, I mean, what do atheists criticize about Christianity? It's their main argument is the argument from evil, and
mhm.
so it's actually a core argument, and or one of the fundamental axioms. And then I don't know. I just force. Yeah, PC is now shut down. Axiom 2 is total freedom of choice is good. So they have an evil and they have a good. And the total freedom of choice, I mean, with total, I mean total. As total and as full as you can imagine, or even more than that. If you, for example, let's say somebody chooses something and that something has a logical consequence, they mean freedom of uh, they don't they consent to the first thing which they chose, but they didn't give consent to the second one, which was the logical consequence. And for example, if they walk over a moldy bridge, they consented to stepping on the first one, but they didn't consent to the bridge collapsing, and so they are this the second aspect or the consequence is essentially a restriction of their freedom. And now I was probably a bit unclear in how I explained this, but essentially the law of causation restricts their freedom and therefore it is evil. Stuff like this. So or if you have a freedom of choice abortion, I will go into this a bit later, but I mean they consented to having sex, but they didn't consent to have a baby, even though that's the logical consequence. But that's why they are for abortion, because yeah, they didn't consent to the baby, even though it's a logical consequence of it. So that's the second axiom. Did you understand what I wanted to say here?
Yep, I did.
Okay, good. That was a bit rambly. Then, this one is not a moral axiom, it's just an assumption they have on the world, and that is everybody is equal. And they assume, yeah, that's essentially the blank slate theory. It's just as fundamental as the other two axioms, but yeah, it's not a moral statement, so it's not, I cannot add it as a third axiom. And then another one that is the same as everybody is equal, and that with that I mean every humans are fundamentally good, and only systematic injustices cause people to be bad. So that's also not a moral statement. It's an assumption about the world. So these, I would argue, everything in Enlightenment philosophy builds on these four things, and that's why things can look very inconsistent from a outsider's perspective, because they don't understand how things are led back to these four fundamental pillars. Um, would you already retract your previous statement that they don't have an ethics, they don't have a virtue that they build things on, or would you still reject it?
As I'd still reject it.
Okay.
As far as any of these ethics go, any sort of semblance of ethics, or it's just a perversion and an inversion of ethics that they borrowed from Christianity,
Um, I
turned
think
on their head.
I would perhaps I would like to clarify for. I mean, I don't mean their system is ethical. I mean they have a ethics system where where everything builds on these four principles or these four pillars, and it is
So I
not.
guess,
And
uh,
also, it is not just a borrowing of Christian virtue. I mean, it's actually a completely new and separate virtue system. And yeah,
I guess I could clarify as far as, yes, they hold these ethics, but if we take what they claim to believe and follow it all the way to its roots, they shouldn't. As if you take the perfection of their philosophy, there would be no ethics.
I would say the perfection of their philosophy leads to these ethical assumptions. But how everything plays out is stuff for the next 9 pages.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Um, yeah, let's ignore that. So, first chapter, removal of metaphysics. Um, they, like I mentioned before, they ideally would just like to remove all ethics from reality, all metaphysics, all God, all authority, everything. And they would prefer it if we could just look at the world and calculate everything from it. And yeah, virtues are metaphysical claims. Therefore, they don't like them, and they would rather have something calculable. And based on atheism, we are nothing but randomly arranged stardust, and all our actions are predetermined. And so, essentially, individual value and agency has lost its foundation completely, according to the yeah, because they rejected these things. And virtues, as in virtue ethics, are at best a working illusion to live a happier life. So that's how they view the old system. And instead, they want to what did I say? Yeah, their moral law is essentially looking at what action or what policy can we make to create an ideally good outcome on this earth. So they don't care anymore about the metaphysics. They just want to look at it practically. What is the outcome? What do we have to change? How do we get there? And they want to do that through systems and through rationality. And yeah, so yeah, this last chapter, last paragraph here is essentially that means um, in the virtue ethics system, you do good because you do a deed because it is doing something is good, or doing something good is good. And in the new system, since everything is inverted, it's essentially as long as you haven't broken a law or made things worse, you are good. So it's changed from an active stance to ethical behavior changed from an active stance to a passive one. And that can be result to outcomes like if a person watches how a crime is committed and a person who prevents a crime from being committed, they are essentially morally equal, as neither of them made made a violation of the law. So that I would say that's that's their goal of the whole thing. Of course, there are more advanced formulations they have probably, and which can get more complex. But I would say that's the core essence in what they at least attempted to do, and I think in practice a lot of them still do it. Yeah, I think there you don't have much to complain about. It sounds like the previous affirmation sounded like you go into that direction anyway.
Yep, that checks out.
Yeah, and one thing they want to do is essentially universalize these laws, because or moral virtues are situation dependent. And so yeah, if I see an old lady wanting to cross the street, then it's moral virtue of helping her, moral virtue of being patient even though she walks slow. And but as a situation yeah, you cannot universalize a situation dependent thing. And so you need to have moral laws that are universalizable, if that is even a word. I don't know. I just made one. And yeah, that means the law has to get more complicated and more imposing on everybody. And it will be less ideal compared to, in any specific situation, compared to the moral virtues. Because, yeah, if you want to make a law how to behave both in Sudan, in the bush, and in New York City, then of course this law cannot be ideally optimized for both situations. But that is their goal. And another thing is in the virtue ethics, this allowed, since it is a personal thing, then you can essentially have a personal and situation dependent thing. Then you can have many parallel hierarchies. So you can have, for example, in a society, a clergy, a government, a family, and ethnic subcultures, guilds, friend groups. Like each group can live side by side and have their own virtues, and they do not require to oppose each other as long as they can live alongside each other. But if you have a law system with a universal claim, then one of these hierarchies need to synchronize and line up. And yeah, but yeah, that's the one issue with a universalized law system or moral ethics system that is law based. And yeah, of course, every person in power wants to have privilege, and then that means they are just more equal than the rest. But that's a concept we know well from Animal Farm. I don't have to. Oh yeah. And in practice, once a bureaucracy is large enough, the laws are set up in a way that everybody automatically commits crime due to the overload. Automatically commits crime, and due to the overload of the system, most are just not persecuted. But that is very useful because then you can blackmail people that are inconvenient. So this is how the law-based universalized system has to be universalized. And yeah, I assume, or is there something you want to note here?
The average American commits 3 felonies a day.
Yeah. Uh, in Switzerland, it isn't much different, and in England, they are just put in prison. At least the ones are put in prison who say a mean tweet. And if Muslims walk along the street chanting "Death to the Jews," then they are not put into prison. Uh,
Mhm.
Instead, the Jew who walks close by gets put into prison because it's too dangerous for him in the street, uh, because he looks too much like a Jew. Yeah. Anyway, but
They're doing that in Portland now, where Antifa shows up and a reporter goes out to film them, and Antifa attacks the reporter. The reporter gets thrown in jail for antagonizing.
oh no, you have English level laws.
Mm-hmm. At least in that state, we do.
Yeah. Um, then the next question is about evangelization. I mean, it's obvious that Christians do it, and it's a bit less known that, for example, Buddhists don't do it. They don't do it at all. They think everybody has their own path, and if they impose their path onto somebody else, then that's something bad. And but atheists of all kinds, like all the Enlightenment atheists, no matter if they are progressive or rationalist or whatever, they all also evangelize. And if when it comes to institutions, then it makes sense because they want to have a universal law, and that way they can reduce suffering that they experience, and they can increase or remove limits of choice and stuff like this. So in institutions, it makes sense because that fits with their moral system, and it also makes sense if they want to do it in people they have to have contact with, for example, co-workers, family members, whatever. But they also do it in cases of people they do not know. Like there is a group of gamers who just play their games, and then suddenly Karen is triggered that they play their games, and then they want to impose themselves onto those gamers, even though they are completely detached. So why do they want to do that? And do you have any ideas?
Idea. Why Karen wants to get involved in their games? I don't know.
I mean, I not just Karen, I just brought her as an example, but I mean, it's also like the atheist who says, um, I don't want to have Christians raising their children as Christians, or whatever. Like it's everywhere. Like all the Enlightenment people do it. Probably not all, but a surprising number of them. And yeah, of course, you could always say go from practical stuff like they want to virtue signals, or um, there is some whether they are in a cult or stuff like this. You could always say stuff, or they inherited the drive from Christianity, but in my opinion, it doesn't explain, like they dropped a lot of things that they inherited from Christianity, and there can be whole societies who don't do that in this way. So in my opinion, it needs a certain reason why they still do it, and to that frequency. And so I found one which I find very plausible. uh, yeah, in Christianity it's logical why we do it. God told us, and also um, we are required to love our neighbors, and truth is important for us, and so we want to tell them that. But in Enlightenment, that is all not a part of their virtues, and so they have a different reason. Um, what now? Yeah, it's essentially here I just wrote, according to their axioms alone, we cannot give a philosophical ground on why they have to evangelize. But during the reading of Steven Pinker's book, who is a firm believer in Enlightenment values, I realized the reason. And essentially, it's game theory. Do you know Prisoner's Dilemma?
Yes.
Here it is. Essentially, you have two prisoners, prisoner A and B, and then you go to each of the two prisoners. They can't communicate with each other. Then you go to each of the prisoners and then tell them, uh, if you confess and say what you did, then you get free, and the other person gets the full brunt of the justice. And then, but they don't know what the other prisoner is doing. And if they both remain quiet, then they get a very light prison sentence. And if they both talk, then they get a longer prison sentence. And if only one of them talks, the one who talks gets free, and the other one gets a lot of prison time. And so if you know the other person and can trust him, then you won't talk. You will remain silent, and then both of you get a short prison sentence. And if you don't know the other person or can't trust the other person, then the only rational choice is to talk, because if you talk, then you either get 0 years or 5 years. And if you don't talk, you either get 1 year or 20 years. And so the risk of him talking is much too, the risk and the uncertainty of him talking is much too great that you can make the risk. And so you will have to talk, and if you remain logical. And the other person also has to talk, and then both confess and both end up for 5 years in prison. And if you have a prisoner's dilemma, then you can essentially solve that issue. For example, if both belong to the same mafia organization, and then if you talk, then you get punished. You get free, but you get punished by the mafia boss. And then both of the people don't talk. So essentially, if you have a contract, or if you have an outside authority, or just some outside reason, then you have if you have an outside reason, then you can change the values in this game theory matrix, and then it is more profitable to remain silent. And then but the issue is, when we look at the whole ethics system of the Enlightenment, they don't think that being virtuous is a thing for itself. So they think being virtuous is only as important in the sense that if you act virtuous, then you feel better. They don't think it's a cause that is good for itself to strive. They don't think it's a good cause in itself. So yeah. So essentially, they don't have a virtuous reason to remain silent, and they also don't have a god that punishes them with the final judgment, which makes them remain silent. So essentially, in the game theory or prisoner's dilemma, they do not have a single cause to remain silent, and or the only cause they have is if I don't litter, then the streets are cleaner. But I mean, some other person may think, yeah, but I mean, somebody else is cleaning up anyway, so why not litter? And then it just takes very few to mess up the whole ethics system of the utilitarians. And so essentially, they have game theory is always a thing. If like there are always parasites in a society, and the issue is, if, for example, when we have a Christian, and that he says it is virtuous to have a beautiful environment where I am, then the Christian will think, just for virtue's sake alone, I will pick this up, this trash, and make it clean, and then it doesn't matter if there are other people who throw litter at the ground or garbage at the ground. But if you have a person who doesn't believe in virtue ethics, then they think they go through this whole trash and throwing on the ground or the littering. They go through it through the view of what is in for me, what does it cost me, what do I gain, and then they end up in essentially the broken window theory. Do you know that? Do you know the broken window theory?
Broken window theory, is it like the New York mayor thing?
I don't know. The idea is, if you have a clean street and somebody breaks a window, then the next person is much more likely to also like put a graffiti there or throw garbage at the ground. I mean, as soon as one person violates order,
And gets away with it, and
yeah,
more people are like, yeah.
yeah, and so essentially, the issue with the or virtue ethics societies or high trust societies, they do not they essentially all contribute to society, and we need everybody to no, we need a majority of people to contribute to society, and we need the few who are actual disturbances to be removed from society. But if you remove all incentives from being virtuous in society, then the prisoner's dilemma starts to take effect, and then essentially nobody contributes to society. And the issue is they are aware of it, but subconsciously. And so now let's say, so they now require a universal moral law system, and but they are aware that if some people don't buy into it, then their whole system essentially collapses. It is useless, and so they have to go to everybody and shame them into also contributing to the system. So they essentially have to set up an alternative to God, or forms of virtue or whatever, that their system still works, and that's why they want that everybody has their own. Everybody shares the beliefs with them. Do you think that makes sense?
Yep, yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, you don't share the right opinions, you're a threat to democracy.
yeah, exactly. And so it's yeah. I think I didn't. Probably, if I just read the text, I would have explained it more concise. But yeah, and yeah, that's, I would say, that yeah. Or another way which you can break this, which you can get back to here, would be a complete control state, where like the Chinese social credit system, where if you are known to be a litterer, then you get minus credit and minus points in the social credit score, and then you can't drive train anymore or stuff like this. That's also a way which we can leave the prisoner's dilemma, or yeah, and it's just this is the reason why they evangelize beyond just their immediate effect, a field of activity. And the next here is the next chapter: mechanics of an utilitarian world. And now I gave you the what happens when you remove metaphysics. What are the consequences of it? But like any solid theory, any theory with enough followers has a way of implementing it in life, and that's the goal of this chapter. Yeah, first about institutions. Essentially, every society that is larger than 150 people builds institutions. And I say 150 people because that's roughly the amount of people we can know personally. It could also be 300 or 200 or whatever, but it's just a approximate size. And if you go beyond these few hundred people, then you won't anonymity will start to be an issue. And once you have anonymity, then you can have parasites. I mean, with that, I mean humans who do not contribute to society but benefit from society. And I don't mean people who are disabled, but although technically they would also be parasites, but I mean people who could help but don't want to help. And yeah, but there's, I mean, so every human society or every civilization has to build institutions in some way or form. But so it's not necessarily a Enlightenment thing, but I would say institutions build the very core aspects of how Enlightenment, utilitarian society, or how they implement their way. And they are also very insistent on their institutions and their authority. So it's not just, we use it for, like in Protestants, they also have institutions, but they think like, I don't know, it doesn't matter if it's this one or that one or whatever. But in the for example, if you trust the science, then I can't just say, oh, let's go to the Creation Research Center, and that's also a science institution. No, that doesn't count. Yeah. So here, the reason why they invest on institutions, let's. Steven Pinker's brought a reason argument for why he thinks institutions are important. He said every human or any individual has biases, and if you have a independent group of people, like with a diversity of thoughts, then you can talk about it, and if you're somewhat open-minded, then you will discover your own biases, and therefore as a group you're less biased than as an individual. And that's his argument for why institutions are good. And practically speaking, yeah, that's mostly true. I mean, with limits. He never mentioned the limits, but it is with limits. uh, but I would argue they do it for other reasons than just this. Um, one is, like I said before, they want to create. They essentially want to calculate everything. They want to have a mathematical formula for how much suffering is there, how much privilege is there, or how much freedom of choice is there. They want to have everything calculable. And yeah, with human societies, with systems, we name it system level thinking. And it is much easier if you have just one form of institution, and then you can calculate everything because it's the same everywhere. It's not just like this nomad group has this form, then this subculture has this form of organizing, and these people are anarchists, and these people have everything on the family level or whatever. It's just everything has the same system, and then you can create interfaces between the systems. We can create statistics much easier and stuff like this. So institutions make everything much easier than if you let humans be humans and organize themselves. And yeah, that's
Because
also what.
everyone becomes a number, and everyone therefore is equal.
Yeah, essentially it is that. And but they would reject it because communism bad at the bad aspects. But yeah, they still do it in principle. They still build on the same foundation. And oh yeah, and the other reason why they build institutions is you probably heard the statement before: power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Have you heard of this? No.
Of course.
Yeah. They think Enlightenment ideas claim that humans are good, and therefore there is a need of something to turn good humans evil. And for them, it's power. They say if somebody has power, then this person will be evil and will become evil. And that's why they set up institutions, because then no individual has power, because it's diluted through the bureaucracy. And as we all know, no tyranny ever came from a bureaucracy. uh, the sad thing is, Steven Pinker wrote the whole book and said, I don't know, 10, 20 times how dangerous it is to have conspiracy theories because they can create tyrannies. And he never once mentioned that bureaucracy or institutions could also lead to tyrannies. So I have a slight suspicion that he is a bit biased. Yeah, but I mean, that's the other reason why they. I'm uh, I'm pretty sure that that's a cause, that is a reason why they want to build institutions. And yeah, it's we also hear it when we hear about policies like the separating of judicial branch and the other branches of the state. So it's a concept they draw a bit further than I would. But generally it's not completely wrong. And yeah, here. Uh, this is my position on it, or the virtue ethics. I don't know the difference because I'm not educated. But the whole concept of power corrupts does not exist in virtue ethics. It's my claim. I don't know if that's if that's true, but for the way I understand it, it does not exist. Um, in my opinion, corruption doesn't come from power itself. In my opinion, corruption comes from vices and from a lack of accountability. So if we can have the person of absolute power, and if that person doesn't have vices, or if there is perfect accountability, then even if they have perfect power, they would not be corrupted at all, like zero chance. And I would also argue that you can have a person with a very, very small amount of power and they are corrupted by it. As long as they lack accountability and they are prone to that very specific temptation that is there. Like the vice, you can have a minimal amount of power, and if it's exactly the vice that they are weak to, then they will be tempted and turn into a very corrupt being. So, so in my opinion, power and corruption is not correlated, or it's correlated, but it is not. They are not causally correlated, or whatever. Would you say? What would you say is your opinion on the institutions aspect?
I think that's I think that's their idea of power is then you're not accountable. If you have more power, then you're not accountable. And
I think you
they
give
don't
them too
like
much credit.
they
I
don't like power in the hands of certain people or institutions, but they're fine when it's in the ones that agree with them.
I think to give them too much credit. I mean, just listen to every communist out there. They say, we have to get power so that our system gets into power and or into effect, and then it will automatically dissolve. So for them, power is just a temporary uh, bad thing they have to do for a moment so that the paradise on earth will happen, and then it will not be around anymore. So I don't think I think they, yeah. And I also here binary view of power. I will explain a bit more why I don't think that. Good.
Yep.
Um, I would say so. Binary view of power. In the if you listen to a lot of people in the secular West, then you get the feeling that somebody is either powerful or not. And why is that? And for me, who is much more in the virtue ethics camp, um, I think the core unit in that area is not having power or not, but having roles. So, like, I have a role of, at the moment, I'm a worker, an engineer, developer who has, at my at school, I have a project and I'm the person with most knowledge about. So I have certain things I can do. I have called it here fields of action. Like I can do, I can freely manage my time however I want. I can order stuff, and as long as I think it's uh, needed, they will just give me the money for it. And but I also have certain duties, and it's just like you have a role, and there is a range of actions I can do, and the duties, and um, everything. Like both the actions I'm allowed to take and the duties I have to do are all built on or interpreted through virtues, and these virtues are built on love. So I should I should essentially love my boss and my customer company and or the people in that company, to be more precise. And so I should do a work that is most loving towards them. And yeah, so that's the way I view this whole thing. And I would say the whole concept of power, I don't even think of it. I mean, sure, I do have the power to order something, or I have the power to just take a day off and not say anybody about it, or yeah, but it's I do not think of power, or I also don't think the boss has any the power over me. I mean, he has a role, I have a role, and this interacts. But I mean, why power? Um, so that's my view on things, and I think that's a virtue ethics stance on it. Do you have a? Can you confirm or deny that claim of mine?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, I'm just not sure if because for me, virtue ethics is not something I studied. It's something, yeah, it's the air I breathe, the way I view the world. And so I don't know what is just my thinking and what is actually based on Christian virtue ethics. But yeah. Um, and now I go into the funny topic. Many post Enlightenment people were heavily preoccupied with sex. And yeah, Freud, for example, I don't know if he's post Enlightenment, but there are the LGBT community, and so like all of these are very preoccupied with sex. And when it comes to sex, there are a wide ranges of fetishes, and one of them are power dynamics. And a very popular one is dominating and submitting. And there, essentially, the person who is dominating the submitting person, he takes away all their agency. It's like there is actually a power dynamic in the actual sense of the word. And if you have I don't know, had some club or some sex club or something, there they do it all consenting. But for example, when we have a pride parade in front of my doorstep, they do not care about consent, and they just walk around in their outfits, even though a kindergarten is next by or something like this. They just impose um, their sexual desires onto everybody else, or sexual presentation. And some do it just because they don't care, but there have been many cases where they actually enjoy dominating other people. I mean, it is a fetish after all. So, I mean, as long as you are not reined in through virtues, you will just live out your vices, and then if arousal through dominating of other people is a vice of yours, and you do not have virtues that go speak against it, and if you don't have a society that punishes you for it, then you will just do it. And yeah, so these aspects are something that Malcolm Collins said is yeah, you probably heard that some people say, "Oh no, Trump is now in power. He will set up a handmaid tale, and now we will be forced to be bred and stuff like this." And Malcolm calls that a public masturbation, because they are aroused by being dominated, and they now play their stories in public, and you just and he is in favor of just shaming those people and say they should stop masturbating in front of everybody. But I think that's it's not a thing that preoccupies a lot of my life, but still I mean, I talk about other people's virtue ethics or ethic system, and I think that this is actually a noteworthy aspect of them. because they get their way of social interaction between humans from, I mean, Freud. I think it was Freud. He interpreted everything through sexual stuff, and he wasn't the only one. And also, in a way, it makes sense because they want to the Enlightenment, or one concept in science is you want to have the smallest, the simplest theory, and the simplest theory that can explain every observed every observed effect adequately. So it should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. And if you can explain, if you can see a human behavior in a very archaic setting, like in a, if you are very aroused, then you don't have your rational brain out, then you react very instinctual, and so you could speculate that this is a very core aspect of how we interact with each other, and then you can extend it to other areas, and then they would say as they would say, look, why should we use 20 different virtues and vices when we can have one that explains everything? And so they don't think that they don't like the more complex role model with, like if you have roles with duties and actions or authority. They don't want that and prefer the simpler power scale. And I would say if it's simpler to describe, then it's also more easy to calculate and to universalize essentially. And did I? Here. And I would say this in the, if you have roles and tasks and duties and authority, then it is a very complex network of human interaction, because the same person can have 20 different roles in 20 different places, or even in the like for example, if you're in the army and you have a unit, so let's say you're a specialist in some field, then you can have two people, and in some tasks the boss, like the sergeant, is above the soldier, and in other situations, some other tasks, the soldier is above the sergeant, because the soldier can be expert in a field, and then everything that touches this field, he is the one in charge and who has the final say, and everything that is about the achieving the mission, the other this person in higher rank is the one with authority. So if you have roles and if you have a authority and role-based view of the world, it is much more complex and much more of a tight network. But if you view everything through the lens of domination, then it's essentially just a linear thing. You have you have the cleaning lady is at the bottom, and then you have the manual labor worker, then you have the engineer, then you have the project manager, then you have the CTO and whatever. You have essentially a chain of domination where each person is lower or higher, but this is still not, like I called here, a binary view of power, and it's a linear view of power, or a scale, or a spectrum. But if you what they then see is, if now some person with more power than the other person limits the freedom of choice or causes suffering in a person who has less power, then this person who causes this evil is now labeled as oppressor, and the person who is experiencing the suffering or the limiting of choice is now a victim. And then from this linear perspective, now they are turned into a binary one. So I would say that's roughly the how they view this whole power thing. Do you think that is logical and plausible that this is how this is built up?
Yeah, it's oppressed versus the oppressor.
Mhm. But it's not just out of nothing. It has essentially a logical reason that that builds up on these four axioms from up here.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense that it is like that. It's not just happened to be that way. Um, so then the next one, uh, yeah, we're about halfway through. Um, like yeah, but oh yeah, now I just repeating. Yeah, now here is new. Um, the thing is, one thing which differs from the authority thing and the power thing, like from the two concepts, is uh, if you have a role, then authority and duty are always linked together. I mean, it's always if you are allowed, if you are now department boss, then you have more jobs. That means you can do more, but you also have to do more. And I mean, with more, I don't mean a more time or more work, but like a more diverse range of things you are allowed to do and more diverse things you have to do. Uh, but if you only view things through the lens of a power dynamics, then the whole concept of having a duty completely disappears. So they do not have a conceptual access for what somebody does with the power. They just know he has power or he has not power, or to be more precise, he has this amount of power, but what it means to have this amount of power or how he uses it is not doesn't have any concept in their methodology. And sometimes a person with power suddenly causes evil, and sometimes he doesn't, and it just happens, and they don't know why. Um, and yeah, sometimes it's because they suddenly see a reason to blackmail them or whatever. So there is, of course, they know stuff, but I mean, principally their system doesn't allow it, and because, for example, in the virtue ethics system, we can say somebody is power hungry, he is prideful, and he is greedy, whatever, and we can call that a vice. But in the whole Enlightenment philosophies, the concept of a vice doesn't really exist, and so you just have a person in an authority position, and you cannot distinguish between a person who goes there with the motive of a vice. For example, they just want to go there because they carve the status and want to feel powerful, and another person wants to go there because they want to help people, and essentially they are the same thing until somebody victimizes somebody. And oh yeah, it's something also because uh, I don't know if that's just an observation which I also wanted to attach is like since they have such a high view of institutions and essentially detached the person and the action of the person from his position and just look at the position he has. If we have a person like, for example, Fauci, and he says something, then it is not he says something, but instead science says something. So there's, because of their systems thinking and institution thinking, they yeah, for them, if something is in an accepted position in the institution, then it's science, or it's virtuous, or it is empathetic or tolerant, or whatever the fancy catchword is you want to use. Yeah. Here, they cannot even detect a person in power who doesn't do a single thing within the realm of their responsibility. Kamala is a great example for that. No achievements, no virtues, but due to her status, she is celebrated. I guess you could. People who would see me for the first time can guess my political leanings with that sentence. But yeah, I think that's also everything here I say here is obviously simplification, and every individual is complex interactions of various things. But I would say generally that's probably applicable. Or would you agree?
Yeah, I guess how do you get like, somebody gets charged with a crime, and it's like, well, they obviously they did it because they were charged. The institution said that they did this, so obviously they did it. There's no innocent until proven guilty in their system.
Mm-hmm. Good. And here I will go to the craziest example I've seen this play out. Or at least for me, it's the most craziest. I mean, that's a very emotionally and subjective word. But it's when
Give
it
me
comes.
2 minutes to run to the bathroom.
Yeah, sure. Now I have to whistle music, elevator music until he's back.
I have returned.
You have
It was
returned.
successful.
Oh, that's nice. Also, um, here is the craziest example. By the way, here, as you can see, is the list of titles, and I'm here. And exchange of value is the last one, which is like this content heavy. And the rest are more smaller things. But the craziest example on how this whole thing, which I explained here, plays out, and that's an argument for abortion. And let's assume there is a woman and she has unprotected sex with a random dude at a club. And she was not yet drunk, so she was fully consenting to that sex. But now a person of virtue ethics would say that she is, if she consents to having sex, she also consents to all the logical implications of having sex. For example, biology may cause her to have a baby, but since she is in the utilitarian realm of ethics, she doesn't view it that way. She thinks she only consented to having sex. She didn't consent to having a baby. And since in Enlightenment utilitarian ethics, um, freedom of choice is a axiom, and it means total freedom of choice. Sorry, it's late, and I have already talked for an hour, or no, for more than an hour. Yeah, since she didn't consent to having a baby, that means reality is imposing its will onto her, and that is evil. And now you have suddenly a baby out of nowhere, which she didn't consent to, and the main thing is that this baby causes this woman to suffer. She suffers hormonally, so it's unstable hormonal stuff for 9 months. Then she suffers emotionally because she wasn't prepared to having a baby, and eventually she will feel pain during pregnancy. So now we have a being that is directly causing her significant amount of harm. And so now this baby is in a power position over this mother, and because it causes the mother harm without the woman consenting to it. And therefore, this very own baby of this mother is an oppressor, and she is allowed to kill it as a valid form of self-defense. And by the way, yeah, this is not a straw man. I have argued, or multiple people have argued for that position uh, with me. Against me, or whatever. I was obviously opposed to it. But I mean, it is the sad thing, it makes sense in their ethics system. But
It doesn't even have to go as far as having a baby or getting pregnant. You can just wake up and regret it the next morning and try to punish the guy for raping you.
yeah, of course, I mean, they don't view truth um, as a virtue. So the yeah, here the pursuit of truth is at one point. So it's always the will at the moment and how you experience it. So if you interpret it at the moment as suffering, then that which causes you suffering is evil. And I just find this specific argument here sad, very consistent and sad, and also a sign why their form of ethics system cannot be true. It's yeah. And now let's go to the last thing that extends this theory of mine of how their ethics system works, and afterwards is just reworking the things we heard. So as of now, I told you how this ethics system orders people into hierarchies and how morals is applied to those power positions. But yeah, of course, if you just have people in power hierarchies, and if you have and if they consent or not lack consent of each interaction, then that is obviously not sufficient to calculate all interactions between humans. And this is where value comes in. Yeah, value is an abstract term for what we exchange. It could be a currency, product, experience, or whatever. I had one course at school, smart services, and that one course was the only course in that topic. And I'm glad I had it, and I'm glad I only had one. Uh, but yeah, now I have a bit of understanding of how they view value, and yeah, it's essentially a thing which they can apply to economic theories, legal theories, uh, and yeah, for example, you have if you want to hear a person putting a price tag on a human, just go listen to communists. They do it way more than any capitalist I've heard of. Um, and yeah, the reason why they do it is because for one, there are fields where it is actually useful and helpful and beneficial, but it also gives an illusion that the whole world can be calculated and measured, and we can precisely describe how much freedom someone has, how much compensation they have, how much suffering they have. You can precisely calculate everything with this. At least you have the illusion for it. And then you just need to have a good enough computer and a good enough and a kind enough person or a logical enough person, and then you can find out which policy you have to take, and then everybody can be equal. And yeah, in some places it makes sense. Market research as an example, but yeah, like many concepts, models have a realm of application, and then if you go beyond that place, then they stop making sense. And that the same is with the concept of value. And if you universalize everything, then yeah, it leads to bad results. And yeah, one bad result is every human interaction is viewed as an exchange of values. And yes, that is very dehumanizing in my opinion. And they view it a bit different, but yeah. And yeah, here is the cog in the machine. And then you end up with situations where when a woman makes the dishes at home and she lives alone, then it's normal. And if there is also a man in the household, then it is unpaid labor. Or if, let's say, you have a family and then your parents are elderly and they need nursing, then that is grueling work. But if you do the very same thing for a faceless organization, then it is empowering because they compensate you for the work with money. And so essentially, they think that if something is lacking, the this value exchange, then it is evil or bad at least, or insufficient. And so they end up deceiving themselves into thinking that the career is the only thing that matters, no matter how mundane that career is. And yeah, so I would say that is the last thing that I used to extend my whole theory of how utilitarian ethics based on Enlightenment principle works. And would you say that is a coherent system that describes many forms of many ideologies that come from the Enlightenment?
Yeah, I think so.
And yeah, good. I guess, do you have any critiques
Mm.
or extensions?
Hmm. I'm sure. Yeah, still not sure about the power corrupts position.
What would you, what are you not sure about?
I guess it just depends on what definition of power we're using.
Um, are
It's probably
you
too small of a critique to worry about. Just continue.
I'm just curious, are you not sure about how I applied power to them, or how I interpret power from my version of virtue ethics system?
How how you applied it to them.
Okay. I guess yeah, I would have to hear more about what you mean, but if you consider it too small of an issue, then I assume it is not a large disagreement, just more of a small uncertainty.
Yeah, probably more semantics.
Yeah, that's yeah. We can talk until late in the morning about semantics. Yeah. Now I want to revisit quickly the four axioms, or the two axioms and the two other things. Um, Reduction of suffering. Now that you have heard the whole theory, I think it's worth revisiting them. So in virtue ethics, both Christian and Stoic, we have many separate ethics, separate virtues. Um, Technically speaking, the Christian virtue ethics only has one core axiom, that is love, and and loving God. Actually, it's just loving God, but you love God through loving your neighbors, and so yeah, that's the essentially the only core axiom in Christianity. But all the others are still very high in regard. Um, but both of them objective non-material rely on objective non-material virtues, but the Enlightenment explicitly rejects the whole non-material realm,
Mhm.
and so that's why they deliberately switch or reduce all, or that's why they deliberately choose suffering as a virtue or reduction of suffering. And I would say they chose that because it has a perception of measurability. Because even in fishes, you can measure how much stress hormone um, they create when they have a wound or something like this, and you can measure stress hormones. You can also measure how many people live below the poverty line, or you can measure how much microaggression are generated through the wrong use of pronoun and stuff like this. You can measure all of that. But for me, I mean, just because you can measure something doesn't mean it means anything. That's why I reject it. For example, I've heard some people say that it is a microaggression that when their name is wrongly spelled, and for me, it's a micro amusement. Um, for me, it's like it's it is a lot of these things are stuff about how do you frame them, how do you, and how much space do you give them. I mean, I give people spelling my name wrong a lot of space, because I see it, or I take notice of it every time. But I do it because of I find it amusing, not because I find it harmful, or yeah. And I would say, in principle, there is something real about suffering, and because yeah, you can ignore away all happiness, but you can't ignore away all suffering. So it makes sense to have suffering as at least consider suffering in your whole ethics system, but building everything on it, on such a subjective thing that can lead and only on suffering, then you can get very very weird uh, outcomes. And so I think suffering is something then shouldn't take as much value in ethics system as it does in the Enlightenment one. And then freedom of choice. In the virtue ethics system, that's a statement that I got from ChatGPT. Freedom means freedom to choose virtue, not freedom from reality. I think that's a good sentence. Yeah, and so for example, Christians say that even the omnipotent God who can do everything cannot do contradictory things. Some YouTuber I heard, I think it was Inspiring Philosophy, he said, God can do all things, but contradictory things don't exist, and therefore they are not in the category that God, which God can do. So he cannot do a square triangle because square triangles do not exist, and so, but the freedom of choice that Enlightenment ethics require us to have is we are required to have the freedom to create square triangles, and so they basically go way over the top with this axiom as well. Of course, I mean, I've never heard of a new atheist or of a feminist that they want to have to be able to do square triangles, but they wanted to have, for example, a world with no suffering but with agency and with freedom of choice. But as soon as you have freedom of choice and you want this choice to mean anything, then you have consequence of action. And if you have this consequence of action, then suffering comes into play. So, I mean, these are logical consequences, and they want to have it without the logic, like they want to reject reality. And so this whole thing is also on the first, or if you don't think about it, it makes sense. But as soon as you start think about it and start questioning it, it turns out to be a bad axiom to have, at least in the form that they use it. But yeah, let's try to talk about this axiom with people, and then you will notice that they will actively blend it out and run circles around things to just so that they don't have to question it. And this is also an interesting statement. I also got that one from Malcolm. They think, so they think of a way how it would how the world would look like if it was most moral, and then they think it has to be that way. And now if now you come along and say, look, it isn't that way, then they don't think reality is different than what would be the most moral option in their opinion. Instead, they think you are preventing reality from being the way that it is most moral. Do you understand what I wanted to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. That if you view their action, like for example, you are not allowed to do IQ research in population groups because ideally every person has the same IQ, and if you look at it, then and if you notice a difference, then you are evil for noticing a difference. And yeah, then equality. In virtue ethics, not everybody is necessarily equal, and neither is in Greek Greek virtue ethics, because it or oh no, in here a verse said in general in virtue ethics it's not necessary that everybody is equal. In the Greek version, they think, for example, humans have a ideal human form. And if you go to Aristotle, then he even thinks that some humans are just created as slaves, and then there is no also the difference between adults and children and men and women and stuff like this. So Greeks definitely didn't believe everybody was equal. And in the Christians, I would say, if I remember correctly, then the Bible says that humans are mere beasts, but we are given the image of God. And so, since every human was given the image of God, every human is equal in value. But that it doesn't that means it is not based on skill level. It is not based on belief or on anything. We are equal in value because God has given all humans his image, and hasn't given it to the cow. And so all humans are equal, and we can still accept differences. But in Enlightenment ideals, there are no reasons to differentiate between humans and animals. Like, there is no God, there are no ideal forms, there are no metaphysical concepts. Humans and animals are the same, essentially, just a bit arranged a bit differently. And so, but they still, this is something which is, in my opinion, a remains of Christianity, unlike all the other things I talked about. This one, I think, is actually a remains of humanity, that they want to distinguish humans from animals, and then some of them uh, search for a specific character trait in humans that no animal possesses. The problem is that's very difficult. Sometimes there are individual humans who have a lower rationalization skill than bears, and so now would you say this bear, this individual very smart bear, is has more human rights than the dumb human? And if you go into that direction, I have only heard convoluted and illogical claims on how they can solve it. Uh, the way I understand it, they want to say if at least one one entity of a species is capable of reaching a certain level of rationality, then they give the rights to all entities of that species. And but then that is a question: what are the borders? Yeah, it's a thing I luckily don't have to defend, because in my opinion it doesn't make sense. Um, and the other route which atheists often go is they just want to extend human rights to everything. And with everything, I mean everything that is capable of suffering, I assume. Or some even want to extend it to everything that is capable of performing meta. I forgot the English word again. Basic cell functions like eating and reproducing or whatever. And the then the but this is a issue because like if you extend human rights to dogs, are now dogs allowed to walk around with guns in America and go to the voting booth? Or I mean, just because you give them rights, that doesn't mean, like, from a roles perspective, like virtue ethics with roles, every right is connected to duties. And if you have a group of people or a group of animals that are not capable of performing the duties, then you are not allowed to give them the roles. But the utilitarian ethics, they just think about suffering and freedom of choice. And if everybody is equal, then they want to extend that to everything, without even considering that they may lack capability of fulfilling responsibilities, and they don't care about it either. And yeah, I would say this equality doesn't really work, and that might be an remain from Christianity. That doesn't really makes sense in their theory, but everything builds on it. So yeah. And yeah, the last one is humans are good. Here I apply Malcolm's sentence on it. The most moral thing you can think of is that everybody is good, therefore they assume everybody has to be good. And anything bad that humans do despite their goodness is because as the system corrupted them into being evil. So these are the core axioms revisited. Yeah, let's go to the other thoughts quickly because it's already 2:30. Yeah, it's already early in the morning. So here, some people claim to be a realist and they are just pessimists. And for me, it's obvious that there are lots of good things in the world, but I can see that if you're a realist, if you're a utilitarian of the Enlightenment variant, then you view good things as total freedom of choice and bad things as any amount of suffering. So essentially, in both cases, you can only be disappointed. And so, for example, if you go to a marathon and as a gift, they give you t-shirts, but the t-shirt you wanted to has run out because everybody else took it already, then you're mad. But if the t-shirt you wanted was still in stock, then you don't celebrate it as much. Or you are not happy when you don't have a headache, but if you have one, then you are mad. So it's like their version, their ethics system, it can only disappoint you. It doesn't know things like gratitude or joy or stuff like this. So I mean, obviously, I mean, I talk about their ethics system, not about the individuals. And so, if they are pessimistic, it's because their view only allows for pessimistic things to be seen, and therefore they can think they are realistic, but they are just pessimistic. So that's the thing which has been bothering me for every now and then when somebody was saying that. And then pursuit of happiness, one would imagine that that would be a better goal than, for example, total freedom of choice. But it's actually, if you try it out, then you will notice that if you pursue happiness, then you won't be happy. You have to pursue virtues, and then you will turn happy. And the other thing is, if you look at those people, then a lot of them do stuff that is clearly making them unhappy. Like, for example, the whole victim mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, pursuit of happiness is definitely not a core axiom of the Enlightenment. And then pursuit of truth. That is the second last point. In Christianity, seeking truth and speaking truth is definitely a moral virtue. It is not a core virtue as love is, but I mean, if you love somebody and if you see reality as given, then it is loving to tell them the truth. But in Enlightenment ethics, truth is not actually a virtue, and any halfway honest rationalist will tell you that. They think truth seeking is only useful because it can help them predict better and therefore reduce suffering or increase freedom, but truth itself is just a tools or a means to an end. It is not itself a virtue. Some atheists obviously have truth as a virtue, but they do it not because of Enlightenment values. And a big number of skeptics And generally, Westerner people don't view truth as an aesthetic group descriptor. That's a word I used. I don't know if other people also would call it that way. But I mean, they are in a society and they say, okay, science is good. Therefore, and rationality is good. Therefore, they say, show me the evidence. If you can bring a rational argument for it, then I will let myself be convinced. Um, Most people who speak that way, they are completely blind to evidence, and they only use these words because their group uses it as a like an icon. It's just, yeah, people know now you belong to this group, and you used essentially it's just virtue signaling, but in a different group than the ones we usually use the word virtue signaling. And yeah, they do many of the rationalist skeptics and new atheists don't actually care about truth, and they don't care about which methodologies best describe the world. um, they just care about whatever their authorities say, and they are just as dogmatic as everybody else. Yeah. And yeah. uh, and then historical progress, that is also something which is pretty commonly used by, yeah, probably many people. But I would say that's not really a moral axiom. It's just that they claim reality to be that way, that it has a constant progress towards betterment. And yeah, also Enlightenment ideology is around for a few centuries now, so it would be embarrassing if it didn't produce any good results. So they also have to say it. Yeah. Okay. What did I say as last words? Yeah, of course. I just tried to gather all my thoughts on these issues. I assume there are many stronger and more nuanced takes or defenses for their side that is better than what I presented here. But I think it's, if we are aware of these concepts, then a lot of their actions make much more sense. And yeah, exactly. That's my presentation. What do you think of the whole thing in hindsight?
It was pretty well thought out. Pretty, it made me think.
That's nice.
It's hard for me to do.
Because you already know everything.
Because I'm American, we don't think much.
Uh,
Hmm, I mean, like you, at least from a 30,000 foot view, you hit the target. I think, and that it's just that whole, it starts to fall apart really easily when you start questioning these enlightened people about their virtues and where it leads, and you find out that their version or the way they get to virtues, they really don't have any virtues.
I would disagree there. I would say what I described is actually their virtue. They just don't want to realize it because it would make them look stupid. And and so they rather get excuses that fall apart than accept that this is actually their virtues. I would say it's like this. I mean, which feminist which feminist says I don't actually care about the people I virtue signal about. I just do it so that that you are like this game theory aspect I talked about. For one,
Mhm.
they have not thought about it because then I would mean questioning the group identity. But also, even if they are aware of it, publicly saying that this is the case is essentially a death sentence for them, a social death sentence. So, and I mean, even I read through the Steven Pinker book, and 9 chapters, he was very good at getting a lot of rationality stuff right. And then the last 2 chapters, so 10 and 11, he showed applications, and uh, it was obvious that he never applied any of these to his worldview. Like he thought that since he's capable of rational thinking in like as a process for a specific question, that means all his whole worldview was of the same quality as his rationality skill. Like it's a he didn't notice that there is a domain difference between a logical argument and secular humanism. I'm pretty sure he isn't aware that there is a domain difference. And I mean, it is very obvious, and I could tell him, but he is also a victim of the Overton window. If I started to do that, I would have to do it in the right way, or otherwise I would be considered a conspiracy theorist and not worth listening to. And then that way he can neatly remove all dissenting voices, and then his diversity of opinion. Yeah, it's even the smartest people in that group, they are not capable of being honest because that would undermine their system. And I would say that is the case with everybody, but with Christianity it is to much a lesser extent than with many other systems. That's among the reasons why I'm Christian. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it was very well put together.
yeah. Thank you. And I'm glad that I did it as a stream and not as a video, or else I would be a whole week and while editing that thing. Stream is better than you don't have to worry about editing. Yeah. Thank you for listening and asking the occasional question. Very occasional, but yeah. Then I
I was
guess,
glad to be here.
yeah, I'm glad you weren't disappointed. Did you, when I asked you if you wanted to be with me on the stream, you were very eager to say yes, or at least very quick to say yes? Were you expecting something like this? Of
Well,
this,
yeah, I was disappointed when you said it was only 11 pages and not 23.
I'm glad it's already almost 3 in the morning. Yeah, but I guess yeah. I will go to sleep, and I have a meeting tomorrow, but I have no clue when. So I have to wake up at latest at 9 in the morning. So 6 hours of sleep. Yeah. Then I will shut up the stream, and then we can say goodbye afterwards. Goodbye, audience of probably 0 people. But yeah, yeah.